All right, folks, welcome to the first sermon, part 2. So in the previous lecture, we learned that the purpose of human life in Buddhism is to achieve enlightenment, nirvana, and parinirvana. So put simply, the purpose of life for Buddha is to attain a complete awareness of the world and oneself, which results in a peaceful, uncorrupted mind, and ultimately, release from the cycle of reincarnation upon death. And to attain this, one must embark on the middle path, the Buddhist path of salvation. So ultimately, part 1 of the first sermon, as we mentioned in our previous lecture, describes the goal of human existence and the path in which to achieve this goal. Now in part 2 of the first sermon, Buddha further justifies his path to salvation by presenting 4 points which basically summarize the nature of the world and human life. And these 4 points are known as the Four Noble Truths. And the Four Noble Truths are 4 truths regarding the nature of the world and human life. And ultimately, these truths present the causes and conditions of suffering, as well as how to alleviate suffering. So with this in mind, what is the first truth regarding the nature of existence? So the first noble truth is dukkha. Life is suffering. That is, life is impermanent. Everything in the world is subject to birth, disease, old age, decay, and death. So ultimately, life is an absurd cycle of constant loss. Loved ones die, material objects decay, our youthful bodies become old. All the things that we love eventually leave us, which for Buddha results in pain and suffering. And to make things worse, we experience the pains of life an infinite number of times as we are reborn in the world of samsara. So not only do we experience the pains of impermanence, once, we experience them an infinite number of times. So the reality of existence is that life is impermanent, but, and this is important, the impermanence of existence is itself not the sole cause of suffering, but it's merely a fact of life. Things are impermanent. So what then is the cause of suffering? Well, this brings us to the second noble truth, tanha. The cause of suffering is tanha, and tanha is roughly translated as craving or attachment. Put more precisely, tanha is the desire to make impermanent things permanent. It is the desire for our loved ones to be immortal, for material objects to give us permanent satisfaction, and for our bodies to remain youthful and strong. That is, we as human beings desire permanent happiness. But here's the problem. According to the law of dukkha, permanent happiness is impossible, because everything is impermanent, subject to decay and death. So when we attach ourselves to an impermanent thing and it decays and dies, this results, according to Buddha, in destructive thoughts such as anger, frustration, despair, sadness. I mean, for example, if you ever talk to someone who has lost a spouse, they will tell you that in the grieving process, they experience anger, frustration, despair, sadness, all of these different mixed emotions. So, when we get married, sometimes we think it's going to last forever, and when it doesn't, these destructive thoughts result from that attachment. So for Buddha, our minds are tormented by these destructive thoughts of anger, frustration, and sadness. And deep down inside, we long for peace. We long for nirvana. So what do? Well, this brings us to the third noble truth, non-attachment. That is, the solution to suffering is the cessation of craving or non-attachment. Now, this is very important. Non-attachment is not to be confused with detachment. Put simply, non-attachment means to let go of cravings, to allow defiled thoughts and attachments to extinguish. But detachment, on the other hand, means to actively push away, to crave for something to be away from us. And this is not what the Buddha means by non-attachment. For detachment is still craving, it's still tanha. So like if you detach yourself from something, you actively push it away, you are craving for it to be pushed away. So let me give you an example. So I think it's fair to say that we have all experienced anger at some point. So to speak personally, one day, or maybe several days, I was very angry with a loved one, and I thought that I would never let go of that anger. I was just so miffed. And I even went to bed angry, and I'm sure we've all had this experience of going to bed angry. However, the next morning, though, as the sun came through the windows and the birds were chirping, I woke up peacefully. That is, suddenly I realized that my anger was gone. That is, just like that, the thoughts of anger left my mind. So I went to bed angry, but I woke up peaceful. That is, I did not actively push away my anger. I didn't tell myself, Alex, don't be angry, don't be angry. It was just extinguished. It just disappeared when I woke up the next morning. That is, I simply let go of my anger. And this is basically what non-attachment means. So to end our suffering, we don't have to push our defiled thoughts away. We just let them go. But how do we simply let go of these destructive thoughts? I mean, it doesn't sound that easy. Well, to do this, we must embark on the middle path, also known as the Noble Eightfold Path, which is the path of non-attachment, which, as we described earlier, is the path between the two extremes of sensual desire and self-torture, which are just paths that lead to further attachment. That is, the middle path is the Buddhist path of salvation, and this is the fourth noble truth. And the middle path is the path of non-attachment, that is between the two extremes of attachment, sensual pleasure, and detachment or self-torture. And as we learned earlier, detachment is just another form of attachment, it's just another form of craving. So what is entailed in adopting the middle path? Well, the middle path, the way I like to explain it, is that it resembles a training program in which Buddhists gradually let go of cravings and defiled thoughts so to acquire a peaceful and serene mind. And while on this training program, Buddhists adopt certain meditation and lifestyle practices which allow them to become non-attached to cravings and destructive thoughts, which purifies the mind. And the middle path is known as the Noble Eightfold Path, and that is a path that consists of 8 practices. But 3 are the most important. Right view, that is, a Buddhist must understand the causes and conditions of suffering. Right concentration, that is, a Buddhist must practice meditation in order to let go of attachments. And right action, that a Buddhist must adopt a lifestyle which aids the practitioner in attaining enlightenment and nirvana. And what is the result of these practices? Enlightenment, nirvana, and parinirvana. So in conclusion, according to the first sermon, suffering, or thoughts of craving, frustration, anger, and disappointment, are caused by craving and attachment to impermanent objects. And by objects, I don't mean just material objects, but also immaterial objects like thoughts and feelings. And to alleviate suffering, one must follow the middle path of non-attachment. And to become non-attached and ultimately reach enlightenment, nirvana, and parinirvana, one must purify the mind of craving by practicing the Noble Eightfold Path.